welcome U.S. Ambassador to Canada, Pete Hoekstra.
It's good to be with you this afternoon. To start off, I just wanted to mention, for those of you that were at the dinner last night and saw Sandy, Sandy said, you know, we don't see much bipartisanship like we used to in the 1980s and 90s when he was growing up. And it's like, yeah, we do. I just went through it. I want to express my appreciation to Governor Whitmer, our two senators, Gary Peters and Elissa Slotkin, to Debbie Stabenow, Jim Blanchard, who all were involved in helping me get confirmed in the U.S. Senate. Each of them played a role. Governor Blanchard has been very helpful as a former ambassador to Canada in helping Diane and I make the transition. So Sandy, it still happens, and it happens in a very positive way, and they were, I can't tell you how appreciative I am for the work that they did in helping me get to Canada. I got a nice vote coming out of the U.S. Senate, 60 to 39. The Canadians noticed it was a bipartisan vote, and it's like off to a very, very good start. You heard that, right, Sandy? It still happens. I'm very optimistic about where we go from here. I serve in an administration now that you may not agree with the agenda, but you have to be amazed at the pace at which they are implementing what they believe and what we believe is the mandate that we got from the American people. Securing the border, done, less than 100 days. The big, beautiful tax bill, halfway done through the House of Representatives, now moving on to the Senate on a schedule that they outlined. Unleashing the potential of energy to make us more energy dependent and making us even more of an energy powerhouse. And the list goes on fairly extensively in terms of the accomplishments that the administration has achieved in a relatively short period of time. It's historic. We move on now to what I think a lot of you are interested in hearing is, okay, Pete, what about this whole trade agenda? Again, the objective of the president on a national basis, he wants to make us more secure, he wants to make Americans more prosperous, and he wants to increase the safety. On trade, what he wants to do is make sure that we've got fair and equitable trading agreements with our partners around the world. And that's exactly what we are trying to do. I am optimistic about where we are going to go with Canada. And let me just outline for you the perspectives in terms of why I'm optimistic. We have two leaders. I was with them when they met in the Oval Office, had lunch. I was one of the potted plants at the lunch. If you've ever been to one of these, there's 14 potted plants around the table. We get to go home and say, I had a fantastic lunch at the White House today. Didn't have much to say, but we watched Carney and Trump interact. If you watch them in the Oval Office, they talked about the 51st state. Carney said, we're not for sale. We will never be for sale. And Trump said, never say never. But the good thing about it is you're watching the interaction, they both kind of had a smile on their face, which tells you that they were getting along personally. If you watch them during the lunch, that same dynamic was occurring. They respected each other, they listened to each other, and they liked each other. And so that gives me a great deal of optimism about where we go and how we're going to get to a point in resolving and working on these trade issues. They're both committed to growth. Donald Trump is putting in place an agenda that he believes and we believe will unleash American prosperity and growth. Carney's trying to do exactly the same thing. Remove obstacles to growth in that country and get the economy of Canada booming again. Can you imagine what happens in North America if the Canadian economy is booming and the U.S. economy is booming at the same time? And I think both of them recognize that we have to move forward. We've got to get to an agreement on the trade deal. So we've got strong leadership, committed to economic growth, committed to the same types of economic principles who want to get to a deal. That gives me a lot of optimism. There are, and I call them pebbles in our shoes, things that I think are obstacles. There's not been a pro-America Canada trade voice in Canada for the last 4 to 6 months. The Canadians, both political parties, kind of ran on a platform of anti-Trump, anti-America. That's an obstacle. So when you read polls about Canada, not doing this or not doing that, we shouldn't be surprised. There has not been a pro-America Canada trade voice being articulated in Canada. Some of the provinces have put in place policies that I've said this to some of my Canadian friends, I think are outrageous. They have, in all of their provinces, they have banned the sale of American alcohol products. And by banning, I mean, it means if you go into a store, American products are pulled off of the shelves. It's not like they're on the shelves with a 10, 15, 20% surcharge or anything like that. They are off of the shelf. They have put in place policies at the provincial level that prohibit American companies from bidding on certain government contracts. Interesting things. We came across the border the other day, and the customs guy, we were the only ones coming into the U.S., and the customs guy said, "Hey, Pete, did you see the long list?" Because we give them our diplomatic passport. "Did you see the long line going into Canada?" I said, "Yeah." And he says, "Well, what's happening at the border is the custom folks on the Canadian side is they're inspecting and they're looking at Canadians coming back into Canada, see if they've purchased any goods in America, and then they put on a 25% tariff and a 13% what they call HST tax, 38% tariffs." And so they're aggressively going after people coming into Canada or coming to the U.S. and going back to Canada. Those are pebbles in the shoes. I think we can get by those. I'm optimistic that with the aggressive leadership that we see in the U.S., the aggressive leadership that we see in Canada, we're going to move beyond this fairly quickly and get this done. Internally, the new Canadian Prime Minister has a couple of issues that he thinks will generate positive growth. If you're in Alberta, if you're in Ontario and certain other places, people will tell you it's maybe easier to trade south than to trade east to west. Prime Minister Carney has put that on his agenda in saying we want to remove these barriers between the provinces as quickly as possible and get them down to almost nothing. In the United States, we can't experience that. Okay? There's not a whole lot of tariffs or barriers from shipping things to Michigan, to Indiana, Ohio, Wisconsin, anything like that. But Carney wants to go and fix this. And the Prime Minister also appears to be very serious about meeting the commitment from the Canadian side to NATO, defense spending, and these other things. You've seen the discussion about the Golden Dome. The President has announced this new security initiative. The Canadians have said that we want to be a part of it. So I'm very favorable. We got a 5,000-mile border. We have 70, 80% of the Canadian export business comes to the United States. They're our second largest trading partner. You put all of this together, it won't be easy. There'll be some bumps in the road. There'll be some speed bumps. But I think it will get done. And when the President and when Carney are both successful in unleashing our economies, can you imagine what North America will look like, what our auto industry will look like, what our energy footprint will look like, what our manufacturing footprint will look like? I think it's all on the upside. Very positive. So I think it's time for us to start a conversation.
Please welcome political reporter for Wood TV 8, Rick Albin.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for being here. This is full transparency. It was 30 years ago I think in August or September when I first interviewed then Congressman Hoekstra. And over the course of time, we've had a number of associations and a number of different roles. But when I first heard that he was about to get his, not first, but second post as an ambassador, I thought, you know, that's a really fitting position for a guy I've known all this time. And he's going to be an ambassador to one of our closest allies, our neighbor, our friend, a big trading partner. It'll be an easy job. What could go wrong? I heard you talking about your optimism, and a lot of what we'll talk about now is going to be review because I think you did a great job of covering most everything. But let's talk a little bit about trade and tariffs. And I know you were explaining about the outright banning of alcohol, and there are some other limitations. You said there would be speed bumps, but you thought we could get past this. Is that a short term or long term?
No, I think the president, and from what I'm hearing from my Canadian sources, are that the president and the prime minister would like to get to a resolution sooner rather than later. I mean, when you take a look at all the Michigan jobs that are at stake, American jobs, Canadian jobs, you know, this is not an environment that would be conducive saying, you know, we can announce at the next, you know, Detroit Regional Conference in a year, we can announce the results. It's got to happen quicker than that. There's too much at stake. Again, the president is focused on economic growth and prosperity for the American people, which means engagement with Canada as our number 2 trading partner, and the interrelationships we have on the auto industry and the interrelationships that we have on energy. We can become the global powerhouse, not a North America, but the global powerhouse to compete with China on autos, to compete with the Middle East on energy. You need energy for AI. If you want to be competitive in AI, you need energy. So you got the whole cabinet working in tandem and making deals and agreements to get America more secure and more prosperous.
Does the United States or Canada, does one need this more than the other? I mean, to be resolved?
Well, according to reports, it seems that the former Prime Minister in Canada thought that that Canada needed us much more than what we might need Canada. But the thing is, Canada has a lot to offer. All right, they critical minerals. They're in a position. Their integrated structure with our automobile industry. That's a unique benefit that they have. And our competition in autos is not Canada. All right, our competition with autos is China. That is who we have to beat. So you can come up with, things that are beneficial from Canada that are very helpful to the U.S. The energy, I think we import a huge amount of energy from Canada. And you can look at it and say, well, we don't necessarily need the energy. And it's kind of like, no, but we make a lot of money off of it. It's shipped down from Alberta and from the north. We process it, and then the refined products we ship around the world.
When you think about the current status, is there a particular issue that bothers you the most? For example, in our pre-conversation with some of your staff and in talking with some of the folks from the chamber, they were talking about in Detroit, for example, that a lot of nursing professionals and other medical folks, even automotive workers, come across the bridge every day from Canada to the United States. And you were just describing the somewhat lengthy process of getting from the United States back into Canada because of some of the prohibitions. Is that a concern to you, and or is that something that can be relieved relatively soon?
Remember what I'm describing anecdotal.
Right.
Okay? I'm not sure that it's a systemic problem across a 5,000-mile border at this point. I think at the end of the day, the free flow of goods, services, and labor will need to continue.
When we think about all of the trade that we do with Canada and the uneven playing field that exists, is there a right size for this? Do we get to a zero sum, or will there still be tariffs from both sides even after this is more or less settled?
I mean, I think the president has made it very clear that there will be tariffs for every country wanting to do business in the United States. I think as I talk with my Canadian counterparts, depending on how they approach this, there's no reason and perhaps the possibility that the trade between the U.S. and Canada may be the least restrictive in terms of tariffs of any country in the world because of where they are today. And, you know, and they have to make up their mind in terms of what they want to put on the table and what they want to negotiate with. You know, we'll put on the table what we want. You've got Secretary Lutnick, you've got Greer, the USTR trade rep, and those folks. They're going to be putting together the proposal. And the interesting thing here is, you know, you've got a president that will be looking at these agreements and, you know, putting a signature on it or saying, hey, you got to go back and rework these parts.
What is, in your opinion, and again, this may be a little early on, I think you've been doing this for 4 weeks, what is that relationship, not the personal relationship, but what is the governmental relationship? Is it contentious? Obviously, there have been some contentious moments in recent months, but is there a general acceptance of each other and this is just the trade part of it, or is it something larger?
No, I think it's, when you look at the relationship that the president and the prime minister demonstrated in the Oval Office and then at the luncheon, I think they sent a signal to all of their staff, those of us that work on implementing those agendas. We want this to be a very positive, we're not fundamentally changing the relationships, the business, the personal, the military, and all of those. We're not fundamentally changing those relationships. We've got some things that we need to work out and we want to work out, but we're going to do that in a very, very constructive way. I think that was the message that was being sent by the president and by the prime minister, and they've continued to do that ever since that this is not going to be a contentious, you know, sitting in a room and hollering at each other. That's not the kind of relationship that we have.
One of the things, and again, I don't know that I can quantify this, but I've heard it from more than a few people, is that one of the aspects that people are seeing that isn't necessarily being taxed or a tariff, but it seems to be an outcropping of whatever this conversation has been, is that Canadians who traditionally might spend time and money as tourists in the United States seem less inclined to do so.
There's different numbers out there. A few people have mentioned it to me here at this conference. We're not seeing as many Canadians come. That's a choice that they can make. Actually, you know, coming into the United States is a great place for them to spend their money and spend some of their time. And the problem on some of this is this has become, in certain cases, more of an emotional issue rather than taking a look at the actual facts. I mean, most of the stuff coming south now, the vast majority of stuff coming across the border, north to south, is tariff-free. You know, it all falls under the USMCA, and so that, you know, but the perception that there's a lot of tariffs is a false perception. It's driven emotions. You had a political campaign. Again, we're missing the voice of here's the benefit to having this relationship, and here's how Canada has benefited. You had both parties running basically an anti-American agenda. The business community largely has been silent. And so, I've done politics. If you got an issue and it becomes a winning issue, man, you run with it, okay? And they found out and they framed it in such a way that it was a winning issue, and they ran with it and they hammered it, and there was no counterpunch, so it became a very emotional issue. This too will pass.
If you had to make a guess, would you say that this relationship between, I mean, let's face it, they're such a big part of our trading component. I mean, we do a lot of business with Canada, they do a lot of business with us. Do you think that that relationship at this moment is still pretty solid? I mean, from everything you've said, it sounds like this is something you expect to be able to be settled, neutralized, or something. Yet at the same time, it seems like, as you pointed out, there is a little animosity that exists, at least in the political rhetoric department.
I think in the political revenue, but you move beyond campaigns,
right,
at which point in time you have to govern. And I think that's exactly what you will see here. The mandate for the president is to deliver more prosperity to the American people. The mandate for Prime Minister Carney is to do the same thing, deliver more prosperity to the Canadian people. And as they're both successful, again, imagine what will happen to North America. More prosperity for America. I think what's damaging us right now is the uncertainty, but is the relationship. I mean, you've got personal relationships across the border. You've got business relationships across the border. We were talking about NORAD, which was, I think, founded in '57, protecting against the threat of strategic bombers coming across. Well, the threat is different now, but that's been around since '57. You've got the alliance with NATO. Canada continues to be one of our Five Eyes partners in terms of the intelligence community, where we don't spy on each other, and we basically make available all the intelligence that any one of the five of us get. We share it with the other four. So you're not going to wipe that away in a month. You're not going to wipe that away in a year, even if you wanted to. And I don't think anybody wants to. And I think that the relationship that will happen here is we will get through this, but the hope and the expectation is when we are done, it will be stronger because the threats are different. We've got to compete with China. China's a threat today that's very different than it was 20 years ago. Okay, the Golden Dome is a solution to a threat that you've got Iran, North Korea, Russia, and China, and their nuclear capabilities. How do we keep North America safe if that's where the Canadians decide to go? America will have it. Who do we expand it to, and who else wants in terms of that partnership? And those, I think, become want to have for a lot of people. So I think the relationship gets stronger in a more complex world rather than weaker in a complex world, because to deliver on the promises that the Prime Minister and the President made, that's exactly what we need.
This is a little off topic, but you've mentioned it a couple of times, and that's the Golden Dome. Mm-hmm. This is not a necessarily new idea. The Reagan administration years ago had some kind of nebulous outline of a Star Wars.
Pebbles or something.
Yeah, something.
Space, yeah, whatever, yeah.
But as we sit here today, and I'm asking you to call on your background in intelligence as the former chair of the Select Committee on Intelligence in the House, is that something that is doable in the short term, or are we looking at a decades-long project to get something like that up and running?
The president said 3 years. Who would have thought that we would have secured our borders in less than 100 days? All right, with the number of people that were coming across. He did it in, he and his team did it in less than 100. Is this a difficult project from a technological standpoint? Yeah, But, hallelujah, we've got a president that's out there that's setting, very, very ambitious goals for us from a national security standpoint, and, setting a goal out there of 3 years, rather than saying, this is hard, and, let's give us 10 years to do it. I can tell you from being in government that if we say it's going to take 10, it'll take 20. If we set an ambitious goal out there that says we're going to do it in 3, hey, I work for the president, all right? He's my boss. President Trump, I believe you. We're going to do it in 3. For those of you that might be skeptical out there, you say, it might be 5 or 6, okay? But 5 or 6 is a whole lot better than starting at 10 and going much longer.
A new bridge in Detroit will just enhance the ability to get things from Canada to the United States and vice versa. And I want to drill down on the automotive component for just a moment. I know you talked about it quite a bit here this afternoon, but because of the changes in the automotive world, how integral is it to make sure that Canada and the United States are in sync when it comes to that automotive production? Because after 9/11, for example, there was a backlog of getting parts from Canada into the United States. It was a real problem. I think you said, we were in a process of getting just-in-time deliveries, and then things were not in-time deliveries because of that backlog. How important is that to be in sync?
Well, it depends on exactly what the president and the prime minister decide. If they come together and decide that the best way for us to compete against the Chinese automotive threat is for America to go it alone, then we'll go it alone. If the prime minister and the president decide that there's a lot of skills inherent that complement each other from the north side of the border and the south side of the border, let's develop and let's bring that together and really be a powerhouse. If that's the decision they make, that's the direction that we go. I'm not going to prejudge exactly where the two of them are going to go, but we've built a pretty successful automotive sector between the U.S. and Canada, and they will decide exactly where it's going to go in the future.
I believe we are out of time. By my own calculation, it looks to be about 3:15. So I'll give you 30 seconds to give us your final thoughts.
No, I think listening to the Prime Minister in Canada and having worked on the President's campaign very closely for all of 2024 and then working for him now in 2025, I am thoroughly convinced that we have two capable leaders. I know sometimes the agendas are controversial, but I'm convinced we have two capable leaders who are focused on generating the strongest economies that America and Canada have ever experienced. And I think they're going to move in a direction that by working together, they will be able to achieve the objectives that they've established, working for the American people and the Canadian people, and that once we get past this uncertainty, we may all be amazed by what we experience. And that's my hope, that's my expectation, that's the mission I believe that the President has asked me to help him achieve between Canada and America, and that's what we're working for. And I think that's good for the people of Michigan and for the people of America. So it's an awesome opportunity. It's an awesome responsibility. We're looking for more advocates to hold out that possibility and that promise for the future. So thanks. Good seeing you. Thank you. Thanks to all of you.